Welcome back to the channel. We're on the Cummins swap lifted Chevy crew cab pickup truck. Last week you saw us do all of the rear. We got the 4 links in, we got our axle with our new brackets, and we got all of our coilover suspension. The only thing we're missing are our bump stops, which are on back order, but that gives us the perfect opportunity to go to the front of the truck. So just like last time, we got all these parts laid out on our table. We have all of our hardware, all of our raw materials to make link arms and other bars, all of our brackets. And if you remember from the other episode, there was a couple inventory items missing. Well, we got these axle side brackets shipped to us and they came just in time as we were finishing the rear. So now they're right here for us to start the front. So our first step is going to be ripping apart the front of this truck, just like we did the rear, to make room for all of our fabrication work. So now that we got all of our shocks off, we even got our sway bar loose up here, we're gonna be taking the axle down and we're gonna remove it from the leaves and then lower it onto this cart with the jacks. And once it's down, then we could actually just take the leaf springs off nice and easy with the sway bar assembly too, because that's also getting replaced. You got it? All right, there she is. Now that we got our axle out, we have access to take out these leaf springs. Some things that need to get removed before we start: the old bump stop mounts. They're probably gonna be in the spot where we want our new bump stop mounts. And then going over to the driver's side, we got a bump stop bracket as well. Also, our pan hard bar bracket's going to be on this side, and that's gonna sit probably right about here. It looks like somebody already did some sort of reinforcement plate where the steering gear box goes. What I like to do is mount up our new steering gear box and attach the linkage. That way we could see if anything's getting in the way of the pan hard bar bracket. Before we do all that, we gotta get that bump stop out of here. So now that we got our frame cleaned up, we are going to install our new power steering gearbox. We got all the bolts hanging out here, and we're gonna bring this gearbox over. Oh, he's got it already. Yep. Prepared. Okay, so we got our power steering gearbox mounted in. We're all lined up and our steering wheel is straight. So what we want to check first, this is the pan hard bar bracket, and this section gets welded to the frame. So we're not going to tack this on yet until the axle's under, but I wanted to make sure there's going to be ample clearance back and forth with the gearbox. And it seems like there's plenty of gap right here. I think what we're going to do next is we have to clean up a bunch of other stuff on this axle. So this shock mount has to go, the old bump stop catch, and then this shock bracket all have to go to make room for our new brackets that are going to catch the bottom of our coilover springs and also produce new landing pads for our bump stops. So while Cole's cleaning up the axle, I'm going to take these 2 frame side brackets and tack them into position. I cleaned up already the edges where they're going to mate. So we started to get these brackets chopped off of here, and I'm test fitting our first bracket. It aligns itself using this factory holes on the original axle. These 2 are started, but they're kind of difficult to go down. You can see this one's sort of jammed up against the edge, and that's because we have a little bit of clearance issues here with this bracket. Very minor, so I'm gonna make a little mark and cut like a little relief right there for that edge of the bracket. And the other spot we're catching is right on the inside lip of this. So we'll cut that off, and that will get our bracket more flush. So we got our second bracket massaged in some corners, and now it's sitting flush. It's sort of self-locating. It matches up with two flat spots here. But in order to get exactly flush with the other side, since the other side is located with two bolts and is held down in a fixed position, I just clamped on a big piece of straight bar tube, ran it over, and then you can just rotate this bracket until it lines up to the piece of bar stock. That way, when we tack this piece in, we're ensured that the bump stop and the whole bracket is at the exact same angle as our other bracket. And that will locate also the angle of our links coming out, making sure those are equal as well. We got our axle all prepped to put back under. We have our crossover steering mounted on here. We have our passenger side bracket bolted on. That catches our lower portion of our coilover shock, provides the bump stop. And then we have the driver's side bracket, same thing. So now that this is all tacked in and bolted in, we could roll this under, get it back onto jack stands at ride height, and then we could start cutting our links. We already have those brackets tacked on underneath there to receive the links on the frame side. So we got our axle under here. Now that we're in place, we have our top link bar to our top link bar, bottom to bottom, and we'll start taking our pipe, laying it out, and then marking for all of our cuts. So we got our first link cut. The ends are just tacked in for now, and we have pretty much kept our pinion angle here. As you adjust this and it rotates the axle in and out, that's gonna rotate your pinion angle up and down, and that's why you wanna have adjustability. So we're gonna go ahead, move down to this link, do the same process, and then we'll move over to the other side. So we got all of our four links put together. We got the axle side brackets, the frame side brackets. We got both of our tubes with our joints installed. Lots of play here if we want to move in an inch or move out an inch. So we got a good amount of adjustability, but we are right where we want to be with our pinion angle. So the next step is we're going to get the pan hard bar bracket. And once it's tacked on, we can start to test fit our crossbar, which I believe is this one here. We got a little Heim joint that's gonna go inside the tube, just like the links did, and then we could put this in and test for size, mark it, and cut off our excess. Pretty good. Pan hard bar mounted between our frame bracket and the axle bracket here. We're not leaning either to side with our Heim joint, which is good because, you know, as everything moves around a little bit, things are going to change slightly in this Heim joint, so we want to have enough play in all different directions. Next, we're going to move over to our crossover steering. So we got our new gearbox here. It's where the pitman arm connects, and it's going to go over to that shiny billet bracket on the end of our kingpin on the passenger side. Start to turn it. Red marks move away from each other. As this thing swings back and forth, it's not going to run into the pan hard bar or anything else that happens to be under here. So far we're looking good. Next we're going to be building our shocks. Our shock bottom mount is fixed on the axle at our ride height, and our shock will come straight up, and then we have to see exactly how within all this mess we're going to make some sort of fixture off of the frame to mount this shock. So we got our shock in place using our friend the zip tie. I've suspended the shock from this brake line right here. Here we can really see our clearances. It's nice and vertical. Now that we're in a position where it seems like we're gonna clear everything, we have to build something other than the zip ties to hold our top eye of our shock. So they give you a tube that they want you to cut down, weld to 2 points on the frame, and then there are two little tabs with eyes to catch here that you weld onto the top of the tube. We're gonna have to maybe make some mock tube out of some weld rod, see if it catches down here and over here. So we're gonna start just by getting some room up here to actually see what's going on. All right, so after looking at how the shock rests and where our tubing could go, came up with a first variation of a plan. So if you're looking direct on the frame rail, this bracket would sandwich the outside and the top. It would be an L bracket. It would come up with a side piece like this. There would be a piece across, kind of like this. And there'd be a hole in the center that the tubing would come in at an angle. And the tubing could get welded around the back and the front of the support, and then this edge and this edge would get welded to the frame. Then on the shock side, our tubing comes up and around, and then there's gonna be two brackets that are gonna be connected. A side view of it, the tubing would run through here. There'd be a piece that comes out, and then a hole to catch the eye of the shock. And then it would be the same piece on the back side, and then they would be boxed in on the top and the front. That way the whole piece is all just one bracket. These are the tabs that they come with the kit, and you just weld on this bottom area. So this is gonna be much more structural. It's gonna be boxed in with each other. They're gonna have full welds around all the tubing connections instead of just a little section right there. So I'm just gonna start out by cutting down this tubing to the approximate size and then laying it in there, making sure that this fits, and then I could start designing off of where the tubing lays to get my L brackets. Okay, so we have everything mocked up here. It's our steering column coming past the back of our shock. That looks good. Then secondly, our spring clearance here with the panhard bar, plenty of room there. And then lastly, our spring clearance with our brake line bracket right here, and lots of clearance here. Everything else is good. Our tube is catching in our two brackets. So I think at this point, we're just gonna tack everything in place. We can take the whole assembly off, do a bunch of final welding. Okay, so we got our bracket welded, and I put it back in here before we do our box end plates, just for a test fit, make sure nothing shifted, and everything still looks good. Okay, so we got our whole piece welded up here. While this is waiting to cool, I'm gonna go back over to the truck where I had marked exactly where these catch the frame. We're in the position we want it. Finish cleaning up the frame and the spots where we're gonna need to weld this thing in. And then by the time I'm done with that, this should be cool enough. Pull it over there, get it all into position, and put the tacks in. Now that we got the driver's side done, we're going to move on over to our passenger side. So I just cycled the suspension, bunch of different scenarios. Right now, we're almost full bump on that side and definitely full bump past it on this side. And really, you can see that there's even still a gap here. That clears, everything here clears. The only thing that we gotta make sure we make this bump stop lower is right here, our steering cross member and our oil pan. So we just have to make sure that we make the bump stop maybe like half an inch before we get our crossover steering bar touching our oil pan. So now that we just cycled the suspension and made sure we're gonna have all of our necessary clearances, we got to take this axle out of the vehicle, take all the link bars off, and do all the final welding on all of these brackets on the frame side, on the axle side, and the link bars themselves. So we are all finished welding up the ends here, and the next step is to tear apart this axle. Once the axles are out, we'll be able to punch out our old seals that are in the axle, and we can do all of our welding and then put fresh seals, fresh fluid, everything back inside. We got our axle all welded up. So now that all our bracketry is final welded, we're gonna move on to the frame and start doing some final welding on all of our bracketry that's on the frame. Okay, we got all of our frame side final welding done. Shock hoops welded in, link arm, brackets welded in, and we got the panhard bar bracket welded in. So now that this is all finished, the next step I want to take is building our crossover bracket. This is going to be a brace that connects our two shock hoops to each other. That way, when one shock hoop sees upward force, it pushes it into the bar, pushes it down onto the other shock hoop. Obviously there's a lot going on in this engine bay with the Cummins motor. What I was thinking of doing is building a little plate that triangulates our shock catch to our hoop, having a hole in the center where tubing could go in, and then that would come up, connect to our quick disconnect, come over the top of the motor, and over here on the turbo side, the bar could come directly over here and then actually catch directly on top of our shock hoop catch bracket. We're doing the mandatory hood close test, make sure we got clearance. So we're good. We got our little stands all welded in here and down to our catch plate. So now that that's done, we got these fresh inner seals to replace our old ones. And once those go in, we can start rebuilding the whole thing, put fresh grease, new seals in and out. And once the axle's back together, we can start running our cross steering member, and that's gonna have a new hydraulic assist piston. So we're gonna have to fab up some brackets. So we got our setup here, we got our bar installed. I thread in the tie rods, just a visual that each wheel is straight. So it's not perfectly aligned, but it's close. And then next we got our steering assist piston. The truck had one originally, hence this bracket, and amazingly, the diameter is exactly the same. So we can just keep this bracket on this side. I might just notch it out a hair for that lock bolt. And then on the opposite side, we got another heim joint, and this is what we gotta build onto our cross steering shaft. Kit provides you with these tabs. No reason to reinvent the wheel, this is real simple. They're gonna slip through the eyelet here and then get welded onto the shaft. Okay, so we got our crossover steering back on. It's looking real nice. Got our bracket here, catching our end of our cylinder, frame side, and we're in the clock position and the piston's in the closed. So when the steering goes out like this, it'll pull the piston, just like that. Now this axle has to get torn down for paint. Meanwhile, we're gonna install our bump stops because our brackets finally showed up. So we got our springs out and our axle is all jacked up here. We have a couple inches of shock showing, and then here we got our bump stop with our bump stop bracket holder tubing. So this is gonna get set on the frame. The bump down here is gonna hit the axle. What we're gonna do is take a measurement of the whole bump stop, subtract length of the shock sticking out, so that way we know what the overall length is when it's fully compressed. Put it up against the frame and then measure the distance down the axle, and that will tell us exactly how tall our bracket coming off of our axle needs to be. Okay, so our catch brackets that go on the axle for our bump stop to land onto are all welded up. I just placed it on here just to make sure the bump stop is going to land directly onto the pad. Looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and mark up the axle where I need to clean up the metal. Now that our bump stops are in, we're gonna get our rear sway bar mounted up. So the first thing is that we wanna build this at ride height. I put the springs back in after we did our bump stops, but we're gonna have to jack up the rear axle again, get half of our travel in the shock again. We wanna be at a neutral position when we're building this out. We got our axle right back at ride height. This arm here is gonna be connected to our crossbar that's gonna be connected to the frame, and then it articulates and down like this. So we got this catch tab that comes with the kit. It can go around the axle, and our bar is sort of level here at ride height. Then as the axle comes up, the bar is gonna go up like this. So yeah, I think what we're gonna do is make a drop down bracket here, and then we can modify this tab and catch it on the bottom of the axle. So we got our brackets on the axle side tacked in when we put our link arms on. And then we jacked it up a little, even past full bump on this side. And we still got a wee bit of room up here. So that's perfectly fine. We dropped it all the way down. We still have an angle here. It doesn't get to flat, so there's no worry of it back articulating in the wrong direction. For now, we're just gonna pull the bottom link arm, swing it out of the way, and I could finish doing the welds on either side. Now pretty much complete the whole back sway bar lift. Since we're done with this section, we're going to move back up to the front. We got our axle back freshly painted. Next step is get it back onto a cart, and we can start hooking up all of our links, our steering, our panhard bar. All right, we got the front fully put back together. So now that this is all in, what we're gonna do is attach the bump stops to our frame. They're gonna land on these pads that are included in the bracketry for the 4 links. All right, now that we're done welding up the bump stops, our next step is going on to this sway bar kit. So the truck had a sway bar originally that we took off. We got this off-road universal kit to adapt to the truck. We are in full CAD mode here with our cardboard template of our arm. I'm gonna take this cardboard, angle it so it comes right to here, missing the tire at full lock towards the right, make the bend back to straight here, and then have our link arm come down and catch our axle right before the end of our tube here. And then we'll be able to use this as a template for where we need to cut, bend, and re-weld our actual arm. After a bunch of grinding and bending and test fitting back and forth, this is no longer straight, has nice bends in it. We got the spring perch here to measure our spring clearance, and then what we want is this second hole to be our drop down right in this gap here, and our bar can catch our axle. Now that this is done, we're going to move on to reconnecting the drive shafts and checking our geometry. The drive shafts will also dictate our limit strap positions as well. You want the limit strap to be at full extension before the drive shaft starts to bind. When we are at full droop, we have now smooth actuation. We're not binding, the drive shaft's not too short. And as we come up, we have plenty of length. So now that we know that we're good at full droop, we're gonna raise the shocks up 1 1/4 inches, and we'll be able to set our limit straps. That way we're sure that we'll hit our limit before hitting our full droop. That will save our shocks, and then ensure also that the drive shaft never goes below that safe point. All right, now that we finished up the back limit straps, we're gonna go on to the front limit straps. All right, so we got our limit strap installed. It so happened that there was a factory hole in the exact position that we needed. We just widened the hole a little bit, put our 1/2 inch hardware in, and voila, a limit strap is here, nice and taut. What we have to do next is plumb our new assist piston from our power steering pump to our axle. These are the two input and output for the lines that run between the two, and then reattaching our stock power steering line back into our two connections here. Once the power steering is hooked up, we can tie up all of our loose ends like our brake lines, exhaust relocation, and getting the painted parts back final installed for the last time. So we got our exhaust final installed. Everything's all tightened up, very sturdy, not going anywhere. So we got everything installed here on the front and rear, our sway bar, our 4 links, our shocks and coils, and all of our steering components. So the only thing left to do now is take on the road and see how it rides. Okay, so we're rolling around in the lifted K20 for the first time. Feels pretty good. Definitely needs that alignment. We just sort of eyeball / tape measure aligned it, but there's a lot of linkages going on here. So again, on the alignment rack, it's crucial for having this thing go straight. It's also has big wheels and tires on it, just off by a little bit. It's gonna wanna pull really hard in either direction. It goes pretty straight. It's just the steering is a little bit loose feeling, but it's a 1989 truck, so a lot of them were pretty loose feeling, even before they were lifted up. Other than that, it feels pretty smooth over the bumps, rides really nice on the smooth pavement. It's definitely, you're sitting up tall, that's for sure. Towering over the other drivers in the world. So, I'd say it's a success. After the alignment, I think it'll be really good to go. You guys saw us do a massive lift on a massive truck. Can't even fit it in the frame, but stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe because We got our Chevelle back from paint, we got tons of work done on the Lincoln, and we have a new supercharged frame-off C10 build that we're getting ready to show to you guys. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.